Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the introductory webinar for the SHERPA project. SHERPA is a European research project that the acronym of SHERPA stands for Shaping the Ethical Dimensions of Information Technology, a European Perspective. And my name is Bernd Stahl. I'm professor at De Montfort University in Leicester in the UK, and I am the coordinator of the SHERPA project. So SHERPA is a project funded under the Science Written for Society scheme, and it's particularly interested in ethical and human rights issues of what we call smart information systems, of those systems that work on and use artificial intelligence and big data. Before I come to the project itself, let me quickly say a few words about the webinar system we're using. So hopefully, if everything goes as it should, you now see a picture that is similar to the one that's on my presentation. So you will have a little picture of me at the bottom, and hopefully you can hear me. And then on the right-hand side, you have several options. So you should be able to see two of them. So at the moment, you should be able to see people and questions. Now, if you click on the people tab, you can see who else is signed into the webinar. You can see who else is listening. And the other option you have is you can click on questions. Now, questions are what we want to use in order to have the discussion during and after the webinar. So if you have any questions as you go along, please feel free to add those. So Grace, I can see you've just written a question. You can't see the people. I have no idea why that is. I can see the people, and maybe somebody else can comment on this. Right. So to some degree, that was good because it was a test of this working. So the idea is, if you have any questions, you can ask them on the questions tab, and I will come back to them. I will not be looking at the questions as I go on. I will look at the questions at the end of the webinar. In order to ensure that there's some flow. Right, so back to SHERPA. So what is SHERPA about? As I said, SHERPA looks at technologies that are related to AI and big data analytics. And a good point to start, of course, would be the question of concepts. So what are definitions of these terms? And if you look up what AI means, you find definitions like the last one on the third bullet point you see on this slide. Systems that refer to or display intelligent behavior by analyzing the environment, taking actions, and have some sort of autonomy to achieve particular goals. Now, this type of definition is widespread, but it doesn't say a whole lot. And one of the problems is that it changes over time. So if you go to the first one, as soon as it works, no one calls it AI anymore. So there are lots of technologies that we see in our daily environment that a decade or two ago would have been advanced AI, which we now take for granted and don't necessarily consider AI anymore. And the final point worth making about the concept of artificial intelligence is that on the one hand, we have narrow AI, which has specific applications that do particular activities, but that go nowhere near general reasoning or cognitive capabilities as we observe in humans or higher animals. So those general capabilities would be what's called general AI or broad AI. Now, I think what we're currently observing, if we look at the public discourse around artificial intelligence, it's very much narrow AI, and it is AI in a particular context. So it's typically machine learning, usually based on deep neural networks, and it uses large amounts of data, so what we call big data, to train those algorithms that are implemented through the neural networks. So in order to sidestep some of the conceptual confusion that comes from both using the term artificial intelligence and also from big data, because what is big data, when does it become big? What we've used in the SHERPA project, we've used the term smart information systems. And the idea behind that is that these are combinations of technologies that use at the heart some type of machine learning, that they use large data sets in order to train algorithms, but they're also typically linked to other types of technologies that can produce the data, that provide the data, And those may be many different things. They can range from Internet of Things to social media. Those data are then processed in some way, and then they feed back into the world. And again, there may be many different ways of doing this. So this could be done through robotic interaction. This could be augmented reality, virtual reality. There are many different ways in which this could happen. So by using the term smart information systems, we try to use a term which encompasses all of these, which is very central to the current public debate around artificial intelligence, but doesn't go down the potential pitfalls of the use of the term artificial intelligence. Right, so we are particularly interested in ethical and human rights issues of these technologies. And when you talk about ethics and human rights, I think it's important to clarify that there are many positive, ethically desirable outcomes that are associated with these technologies. On a broad level, we can see activities that try to harness these technologies to achieve global challenges. And a very prominent example of that would be the AI for Good summit, which is run by the ITU, which is now, there's going to be one again this May, I believe, in Geneva, where the idea is that researchers and practitioners will come together to explore how technologies can contribute to the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. More broadly, the most frequently cited desirable outcome of these technologies is economic growth. So the idea is that they will create efficiencies, they will stimulate economic activity, and that's good for society as a whole. There are hopes that better personalized services will be able to be developed on the basis of them, which can help in all sorts of ways, but including also providing and improving human capabilities, for example, to compensate for disabilities, but also to improve our abilities in other ways. There are suggestions that these technologies can help inclusion, can help make sure people are able to participate in society and also in democratic decisions. And overall, there is a hope that these technologies can lead to empowerment of citizens and people in general. So I think it's important to keep that in mind, that there are lots of positive outcomes that we associate with these technologies. But at the same time, there are also lots of concerns. So this is a short list of some of the frequently cited ones. The most important one and most widely discussed is probably data protection. But there are lots of other issues around changes to social fabric, possibility of increasing inequality, alienation. There are worries about the concentration of power and money in very few hands, notably the big tech companies. The fact that these technologies are often difficult to understand may lead to perception or real loss of control of individuals over their actions. There are worries that they lead to human enhancement in a ethically problematic way. There's a big discussion around transparency. How do we know whether there are biases built into the algorithms, biases that are picked up through the use of biased data, which then can lead to discrimination, to disadvantages for individuals on the basis of characteristics that are protected or that have nothing to do with the decision in question. There are worries around security, and that's the picture you see on the right. There's a recent report around misuse of artificial intelligence. And generally, there are worries around possible human rights infringements. Just to pick up some of the big ticket items, the influence that these technologies will have on the labor markets are highly debated. So one of the first important studies to the topic, this was the report to the American president, still under Barack Obama, very much highlighted this worry around replacement of human beings through new technologies. And one example they gave in this particular report is the use of autonomous vehicles. In America alone, there are about 2.5 million people who make their living through driving vehicles, bus drivers, truck drivers, taxi drivers. If a significant proportion of those were to be replaced through autonomous vehicles, then that would create large-scale social problems. And there are questions of who would be responsible for that, how could these people be kept in employment, and many other follow-on questions. Another one is questions of diversity and gender. So AI development as part of computer science is very male-dominated, which has led to a number of well-documented cases of gender discrimination built into technologies, or gender biases built into technologies. And the picture you see on this slide is an advertisement for an event that we're running as part of a larger conference in Oxford that's going to take place in September, where we're trying to bring together women to discuss the ethical issues in AI from a gender perspective. But it's not just gender, there are all sorts of diversity questions, race, skin color, all sorts of other issues of diversity which may be negatively affected by smart information systems. And then, as my final example here, in the longer term, there are questions of, now, if these technologies actually do continue to develop, and if narrow AI continues to be as successful as it currently appears to be, now, is there a point where this actually becomes broader AI, where machines then can be taken for persons, where there are questions of how do we treat machines, do they get rights? The picture you see here is of a robot called Sophia by Hanson Robotics, and this robot has been very prominent in gaining citizenship of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. So the question is now, how do we deal with machines in future if they become autonomous and apparently intelligent? So this is just a short list of issues, and there are many others that could be listed. A key question is, well, what's done about it? Who's doing what about it? And here are some of the suggestions currently discussed. One of them is around legislation and regulation. The most prominent one, or the most prominent piece of legislation at the moment, is probably the General Data Protection Regulation, which covers aspects of smart information systems. So it covers certain types of personal data, but it doesn't really cover all of the aspects of smart information systems. Hence, there are lots of other suggestions. So one is around standardization. There's a high-profile activity currently underway by the IEEE, but various other standardization bodies are also looking into whether there is a need for standardization of the ethical aspects and the human rights aspects of these types of technologies. ICT is well established as an area that requires some oversight, and professionalism, and the development of professional bodies is something that goes back many decades. And groups like the Association for Computer Machinery, so the ACM, the biggest professional body in ICT, has been developing and has just refreshed its code of ethics. Some of it, or to some degree, it may be relevant to these particular type of technologies. There are specific codes, like the one by the Future of Life Institute, that looks at ethical issues of AI. And industry is also very keen and very aware that these are issues that they need to engage with. And the Partnership on AI is a industry group that tries to think about how industry can address these issues proactively. There are various activities around education and awareness, integrating these issues into training, into curricula. And just 2 days ago, many of you will be aware, the high-level expert group on AI published its guidelines on, they're called the Ethical Guidelines for Trustworthy AI. So a high-level European policy-supported initiative to move towards ways of dealing with these technologies. So one of the problems that we're facing in the SHERPA project, and that society as a whole is facing, is that the discourse around these issues is extremely complex and dense. And you see here some examples of publications that are pertinent, that inform our thinking about these technologies. There are many more. So here at De Montfort University, we've started to collect just policy documents, and we have way more than 50 at this point. These documents, but also research reports and media interventions are extremely comprehensive, and or they cover many different aspects, but they're also a huge body of literature that's very difficult to really get an oversight of. So what do we do in the SHERPA project? So far this was a description of the situation. What do we do in the SHERPA project? Well, first of all, we're trying to come up with a representation of what are the ethical and human rights issues of those smart information systems. So we're trying to distill insights into the nature of those issues. We're doing this through case studies, scenarios. I'll come back to those in a second. We're also looking at cyber threats. We're looking at ethical impacts and societal tensions arising out of those. And we're looking specifically at how human rights frameworks reflect those. So the first activity, the first empirical activity we've undertaken was to develop a set of case studies, 10 overall, and you see examples of pictures representing some of those here. So we've looked at cases around Internet of Things. We looked at insurance and financial applications of these technologies. We've looked at social media, but also at areas that may not necessarily come to mind immediately, such as agriculture. We've looked at research, in particular neuroscientific research. We've looked at risk management through monitoring of supply chains, but also the use of smart information systems as tools for cybersecurity. So these are case studies which are which we have developed and which are now started to populate our website, in particular the workbook section of the website, where each of these case studies will be displayed individually. The case studies focused on currently existing technologies, but we also want to look a bit into the future, which is why we've started to develop a set of scenarios. We're working on 5 different scenarios, and you see the examples here. Well, you see the topics of the scenarios here. So we're looking at predictive policing, warfare, mimicking technologies, so what we also call deep fakes. We're looking at smart information systems in future education and autonomous vehicles. These are scenarios that where we try to extrapolate a few years into the future to see how these technologies will have impact in, let's say, 5 years. So that's the first thing. We're trying to get a picture of what are these technologies, what are they likely to be, and we're trying to do some empirical research, or we have done some empirical research to underpin this. The next point, of course, is that we need to be aware of what other people are saying. So smart information systems is not just a SHERPA thing, it's a much broader societal debate, which is why we have a challenge in ensuring that we understand societal perceptions and how the competing views of rights are being looked at. So for that purpose, we have a stakeholder board, and you can look at that on our website. You can see who's on it. We have started to do and continue to do a bunch of expert interviews. We are planning to do an online survey where we're going to look at possible ways of dealing with these technologies. And we will also do a Delphi study, which is going to take place in about a year's time. So that's for reaching out to stakeholders and the rest of the world. The outcome of all of this will be that we want to come up with a set of options on how to deal with ethical and human rights issues. The core aspect of that is what we call the SIS Workbook. That's basically a page on our website where all our insights will come together. So you'll be able to find the case studies there, the scenarios there, and our reports there, as well as our suggestions on what could be done. And the suggestions will include the following. So that we will suggest guidelines for research and innovation. So how can people who do research on these technologies actually deal with ethical and human rights issues? We look at regulatory options. We will look at standardization. So we want to contribute to the debate around how standards might shape these activities. We also look at the technical side of it. Are there technical solutions? How do they fit with non-technical solutions? And we are exploring the possibility of a regulator, and are thinking about proposing a terms of reference for such a regulator. Now, having this large array of possible options, we need to narrow it down, and that's what we do in the under challenge 4. So we want to then test and validate possible solutions. We want to see how do they work. We want to work with stakeholders to explore what the best options are and how they meet these particular concerns that people have. So this will be done mostly through a set of focus groups. And the outcome of that will be a set of prioritized recommendations. So this is going to be where the SHERPA project will put forward what we think are the most important ways of moving forward with this. It's probably also important to point out at this point that the SHERPA project isn't the only project in this space. So we're working very closely with two sister projects. One is called Sienna and one is called PanelFit. They're not identical, but there's a significant overlap between those three projects, and we're working very closely with them to ensure that our recommendations align with theirs. So and then the final challenge is, now assuming we come up with these brilliant ideas, what do we do about them? How do we disseminate them? How do we make sure that they get taken up in society? So we do all the usual thing that European projects do. So we have a dissemination and communication plan. We have an online presence. But I think what sets us apart is, on the one hand, we have an artist on in the consortium. So we're looking at ways of artistically representing the technologies and the issues and how to deal with them. And secondly, as part of our exploitation activities, we have a specific advocacy section. So towards the end of the project, once we've agreed on where we stand, what our recommendations are, we will actually go out to policymakers, to decision makers, and advocate our suggestions. Okay, so that's most of my my narrative. If you're interested in this, and I hope you are, then I would invite you to have a look at our project website. You can sign up to our Stakeholder Network there, which means you would be kept up to date with newsletters and invitations to events. We hope you spread the word. This is our consortium, very briefly. And I will stop by showing you a brief video that we've made, which gives an overview of the project. And I hope this is going to play for you now.
Whether it's the multitude of apps on a mobile phone or the clever energy meter in your own home, we are surrounded by devices that are constantly collecting data about our lives. Smart information systems are evolving from the combination of artificial intelligence and big data analytics. These smart information systems can spot business trends, help prevent diseases, and combat crime. Smart information systems could bring a variety of benefits, but at the same time have the potential to disrupt society, ethical values, human rights, and life as we know it. Welcome to SHERPA, the EU-funded project which, in dialogue with stakeholders, will examine ethical and human rights issues. These issues could include privacy and data protection, algorithmic biases, discrimination, and unemployment. We are working together to enhance the responsible development of the latest technologies, to find desirable and sustainable solutions that can benefit both innovators and society.
So, time for questions. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to type them now into the question bar. I'm not sure whether you can see each other's questions. It appears that no. Okay, so okay, it appears you can't see other people's questions. At the moment, I don't see any questions that there's a question. So yeah, I probably should have included that. The project started on the 1st of May last year, so we're not quite a year in, and it's a 3.5-year project. So we're going to go until November 21. Somewhere there, I think, yeah. Okay, next question is, where and when will the work be available, and how will people be able to access it? So the workbook is already available. If you go to the SHERPA website, there's a tab which we call the workbook. And that's going to be a dynamic resource that we're going to populate over time. So at the moment, we only have 1 or 2 case studies on there. In the next few weeks, more of the case studies will appear. So hopefully by the end of this month, we should have them all 10 of them out there. The scenarios are going to go on there very soon. And so any of our output will be visible there. So it's basically just a page on the website. Next question is whether we're engaging with regions outside of the EU. So we have a very strong EU focus. We have a few people on our stakeholder board who are from outside of the EU. So we have people from America, but the focus at this point is on the EU. So next question is around the human rights framework that we're going to use in the project. Does the AI development affect our human rights? So what we're looking at here is the current European human rights framework, and our colleagues at the University of Central Lancashire in Cyprus are focusing on this work. We also have a human rights civil society organization, Acritas, who's working on this question. And really what we're doing is we're looking at the impact of these technologies on current human rights. The most prominent one, clearly the one to privacy, but we're also interested in other types of human rights issues. We're not, at this point, thinking about sentient machines, human rights for machines, and so on. So we are sticking with the human rights of the human part of the human rights, and not the machines. Right, next question is, what does it mean to join the stakeholder network? If you join the network, can we collaborate with you? Yes, so if you join the stakeholder network, you will basically join our list of people who are interested, and we will be using that list in order to reach out to people when we move on. So we have, for example, a variety of activities that we are planning where we will reach out to the stakeholder network. So we have workshops for various activities when we do our focus groups. We're also interested in feedback on our online activities. So for example, our scenarios, which will go live, well, I would strongly hope sometime this month. Once they're on the website, we will send this out to the stakeholder list and ask people to comment on this. So yeah, that's what it means, join the stakeholders. That means that we are aware of who you are and what is, who's interested in working with us. Next one is, what are findings so far? Will AI be good for us or not? Oh, that's a question which I guess I would have to answer with it depends. This is what I try to do in the presentation. I try to show that there are benefits, there are downsides, and neither of those will disappear. I think the main point of SHERPA and of interventions coming out of projects like SHERPA will be to find ways of balancing the advantages and disadvantages and ensuring that the benefits materialize while the problems can be minimized. So that's my wiggly answer to that. So next one is, could you say a bit more about the work on ethics and human rights? I'm interested in your plans regarding AI and warfare. Can you say a bit more about this? So at the moment, so warfare is one of the scenarios. So this is where we're looking at what is the likely impact of those smart information systems in warfare in the near future. And the way we're currently structuring these scenarios is we're trying to identify what possible consequences will be. So we're not taking a set ethics framework. So we're not saying we're all deontologists or utilitarians or whatever it might be. But we're trying to explore what is perceived as ethical issues and what are ways of addressing those. And in warfare, I mean, that's of course also a very populated area. There are lots of people contributing to this discussion, whether we should or could or should not have, whether it would ever be legitimate to have autonomous machines engage in warfare, kill people, make killing decisions. In the context of the high-level expert group decision or the high-level expert group document yesterday, there was a comment from one of the members of the high-level expert group who suggested that, for example, having machines make decisions about killing people should be a red line, should be something that should never be allowed. Whether that is, so I think that, and that would be a very strong ethical position. Whether this is feasible, whether that makes sense is a different question, but I think that sort of illustrates the sort of debate we're interested in. Right, so in addition to joining the network, what other options for collaboration do you envisage? So I think there are various ways of interacting with us. I think joining the stakeholder board would be, or sorry, the stakeholder list, so signing up will be the first stop to do that. Of course, if there are other activities that people are interested in, if you think, for example, we can contribute to other discussions around ethics of AI and so on, we would be very happy to engage with that. So if you have any suggestions, then please feel free to contact me personally, contact anybody else in the consortium. So from our perspective, the easy first point would be join the stakeholder list. Okay, I think I've answered the questions that are live at the moment. I'll give you all a minute more in case anybody else has anything else to think of. But if there's nothing else, then I hope you found this informative. There will be a set of further webinars coming up in the future. So we will, for example, have webinars around specific cases, well, examples of the case studies. We'll have them around scenarios. We'll have, as we go on, we will have webinars around the various components as I outlined them today. And I guess that's, yeah. So if you are interested, please join the stakeholder list, and we will be in contact. I hope you found this entertaining and useful, and please feel free to contact me if you have any comments, any suggestions. I think with that, we've reached the end of the webinar. Thank you all very much, and I will close it now. Bye-bye.